And my name is Joff Pedretti, and I created this little seminar. This is the fifth or sixth in the series of that, called 10 Years to $10,000 an Hour. And I'll get a little bit into that in a little bit. Before I get into it, though, I just want to introduce myself a little bit, because I think, sometimes when I've talked to other investors and agents who are investors, I just, I find out that, like, oh, they got a lot of experience from doing this from their parents, or they inherited a lot of money, and that's how they kind of got started with this. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of background about myself, I am born and raised in Wisconsin. I was my family has a farm in actually northern Wisconsin. So if my accent sounds thick, it's because I'm actually not originally from the Madison area, where most people don't have an accent quite this thick as mine. And then anyways, my parents moved to the Madison area when I was pretty young, elementary school age. No investment real estate experience in the family, not a family of high wealth, just kind of ordinary incomes growing up, and prior to that, less so. And both my parents were non-traditionally in college when I was going through grade school before moving to Madison. I ended up getting a degree in physical education. I was an elementary physical education teacher for 16 years prior to becoming an agent. But somewhere in the middle of that, I saw a really good opportunity to get involved in investment real estate. So 2011, that was a time for teachers. There was a lot of uncertainty in education at that time. And that's when I started thinking, okay, it would be a good idea for me to have some income source besides the school district that I worked for. So at that time, I started looking at different investment options. I also have always been a saver by nature. So, or at least that's how I was raised, was to, save money. So fortunately for me, even though I was on about at that time, probably somewhere between like a 40 to 50K a year teaching salary, I had $40,000 saved up for an investment. And with the housing market in 2011, I saw that as an opportunity of like, okay, hey, even though my personal residence is worth quite a bit less than, than what it is when I bought it, I saw that this would be an opportunity for me to get involved in investment real estate, not have to compete. And that's when I started. So that was 2011. And, fast forward 10 years from that, that's when I got up to the 10K an hour, which I'll share with you here in a little bit. And then now it's been a couple of years since then. And yeah, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. First time talking to people down in Florida. So thanks again for inviting me down here. It's been awesome, especially, I know this is colder weather for you, but for us, like, this is a substantial improvement from where I just came from. So, all right, so let's see here. Oh, I'm just trying to click ahead on the slide. There we go. Okay. So this is my journey in terms of like purchases. So that first one was a single family house. It was intended to be a flip. And then, the market went bad. They turned it into a rental. They tried to sell it as a rental. This was like their second or third time trying to sell as a rental, and I came along and negotiated a pretty good price. From there, I did a 1031 exchange. There was a developer that wanted to buy that block. He already owned a bunch of properties on that block. He turned it into a high-rise apartment. In that buyout process, I did what's a 1031 exchange, which, if you don't know that, basically just allows you to take proceeds and without getting taxed, you get to put it into the next one. So I did a 1031 exchange into two properties. They were both 2 units. So I just went from a single family house up to 4 units. And of course, I was saving up for a second property, which ended up being the third property, East Main Street. And you can see I got a little bit bigger. And that was when I got my license. So 2017, I got my license with the intention of purchasing a property every year and making a little bit of and using the commission towards the rehab expenses, because I realized, I got really lucky on that first one. Ever since then, pretty much every property I've ever bought, I put, $10,000 into it in the first year, almost automatic. So, so I got my license 2017, purchased that one. And then I was really fortunate. I started having a lot of success as a real estate agent, and I got really focused on the business. So I started helping more and more people every year, and gradually got up to the point of like, I can start my own team. And I was just like, okay, I got to get back to why I originally started doing this, which was to buy and invest in more real estate. So in 2020, I doubled my portfolio that year. I bought an 8-unit and a 2-unit, and went from 9 to 19 units in 1 year. Then bought an 8-unit the next year, 4-unit the next year. And then this year, I ended up buying a 5-unit, a 24-unit, and another 2-unit. So it was like another year similar to 2020, where I didn't quite double my portfolio. I did sell a property in the process of doing that. But yeah, ended up kind of growing that. Okay. All right. So here's the actual progression, 10 years to $10,000 an hour. So when I was on that first rental property, when I first bought it, cash flow of $7,000 a year. I kind of estimating back to that time, the biggest was the turnover. So turnover week was probably about half of that 40 hours. But the rest was, showings. Occasionally I get a call to come out to the property. So when you factor in, okay, 40 hours a year, about 3 hours a month, about 125 an hour. So then once I was up to 2 rental properties, now I'm making quite a bit more, $20,000 a year, 80 hours a year, because now there's more time going into them, 250 an hour. So nice jump up. But you'll see it starts to plateau, because even at 4 rental properties, even though I'm making substantially more, there's a lot more time involvement. And so the dollar per hour is just incrementally going up. Now, this 5 rental property scenario didn't actually happen, because heading into that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to grow anymore, because if you remember seeing on the last sheet, I kind of stopped after 2017, stopped buying property. So I was like, if I'm going to keep growing, I'm going to need some help. And so that's the time that I started looking for a property manager. So I hired a property manager, and just having that weight off my shoulders of like, I'm not gonna, because I saw some good deals that I was like, oh man, I'd like to do this, but I don't have the time right now to invest in this. But the property manager didn't matter, because he was like, oh yeah, we'll do that. Here's how much, if we do a project like this on the side, here's our hourly rate, and it was just like, okay, this is the way to go. So when I hired him, it just really changed the game, because now, one, I had a lot less time invested, and it just made everything a lot easier. So with that kind of mental load off my brain, it was like, okay, great. Now I can buy some more properties. So like I said on the last slide, I went from 9 to 19 units that year. But that first one was this 8-unit. And so, like, had I kept doing it, I would have had a part-time job. I would have been up to 21 hours a month. And there's some months where it's not possible, because like I said, the turnovers, if there was too many turnovers at one time, it would have turned into a full-time job for a couple weeks here and a couple weeks there. And so by hiring property management, though, my time got substantially less. Instead of 21 hours a month, I'm down to 10 hours, essentially a year. So how does that break down? 12 15-minute phone calls. So every month, just a 15-minute phone call, just checking in. Hey, how's everything going? 2 walkthroughs of all the properties at some point in the year. So I usually like to get out like really early in the spring and just kind of see what's going on with the properties. And I try to get back out in the fall. And from there, I'll put an email together and say, hey, because tenants will only call the property management about things that negatively impact them. But in the property manager is very focused on making the tenants happy because that makes their job easier. They're not always so focused on the actual structure itself. Now, if they happen to see something, they'll definitely let you know, but they're not going to pay attention to the same level that you will. And the tenant's definitely not paying attention to the same level that you are. So for example, there's one fall I went out and one of the trees in the backyard, which is a pretty sizable tree, the limb was getting long enough that it was now brushing up against the roof. Wasn't causing any problems yet, but I knew it was just a matter of time before it did. So called up the property manager, took a photo of it, sent it to him, said, hey, we're going to need this addressed. Tenant would have never contacted a property manager about that unless it got so bad that there was a roof leak and then that was affecting their stuff. Then it would. But again, that's why the 2 walkthroughs of all the properties, that's that time for that. And then just 2 hours of just random stuff pops up, hey, we've got, your furnace at 123 Main Street, unit 2 just went out. Looks like we can replace a part. It's going to be $500, or do you just want us to replace the furnace? What do you want to do? So like those types of calls. So anyways, so all collectively 10 hours a year. All of a sudden I go from, theoretically around $300 an hour up to $6,000 an hour. And then fast forward a little bit further, once I got up to 27 units, 8 of them were not financed with property manager. I was up to 120K a year and in 12 hours, because some of that stuff takes a little bit more time now, and $10,000 an hour. So that was kind of the path to the $10,000 an hour, and that's why I called this session 10 years to 10K an hour. All right, so okay, so now we're getting into the disclaimers here. So I'm a licensed agent who's bought and sold investment property both before and after getting my license, and I'm going to share some of those experiences with you today. I am not a legal professional, so if you get into the legal things, make sure you're consulting an attorney. And I'm definitely not an accountant, so make sure you consult a CPA if you're looking for more concrete advice on the running the numbers. And of course, I'm not a financial advisor, so if you're looking for guidance on setting up a portfolio, I'm definitely not your person for that. And then also, I call it 10 years to $10,000 an hour, not 10 minutes or 10 months. I think a lot of people expect things to happen really quickly. It is a get rich slow game. It takes time for things to develop, and the benefits are not always immediate. And it is a snowball effect. And I do talk about this from time to time. It's like, just think about, it's a bit harder for you guys to think about than it is us up in Wisconsin. But, if, when we're, building, when I was a kid building a snowman, at first, you kind of pack in a lump of snow. Now you're getting on the ground, you're pushing it, and it feels hard at first. And it feels, because, you're kind of just pushing this mound, and it's not so easy. Well, once you kind of get it to the edge of the hill, now it's kind of rolling down, and momentum is letting it do the work. Well, now you can build another one and let that one roll down the hill. And when you have multiple snowballs kind of going down the hill, all building on their own without you putting in so much work anymore, that's when you start to really see the benefits. So at first it feels like work, and then eventually it gets a lot better. All right. So why am I doing this? So the reason I do these talks is because investment real estate's changed my life, and this is a part of how I can give back. I hope to help you get started or accelerate your progress. And by supporting you, I'm supporting the goals that and the positive things that you're trying to support in your life. For me, I now have a scholarship. So my team is the Opportunity Team in Madison, Wisconsin, and we have an Opportunity 2020 scholarship. in 4 years now, we've given $46,000 in scholarships. And the goal is to keep building this up to the point where we can give a full ride every year. This is ultimately the goal that we're trying to get to. So your goals, figure out if you're just getting started, or maybe if you are started, is figure out your big why, because I found the reason that probably 80% of the people I talk to never get started in investment real estate is they haven't figured out yet what's their driving force to get them over the hump on this. And the 20% that do move forward with it are people who do figure that out. They figure out what their big why is and what's motivating them to do what most people don't do, because there's a lot of people out there that'll invest in mutual funds, have a Roth IRA or a 401k or something like that, because everybody else seems to be doing it. Not everybody else seems to be doing investment real estate. So, you got to figure out kind of what makes you different. Also, the freedom number. So for those of you that already are investing, it's a good idea to have a number for like, hey, what do I want this to look like for me to exit out of, not maybe completely exit out of investment real estate, but like, change the way, like not keep, I already know what that looks like for me. I have a kind of a number in mind that once I hit that, like, not that I'll never do an investment real estate deal, but it's going to change the way in which, I'll be actively looking for them. So anyways, so those are just some things to consider. The BRRRR method is probably closest to flipping. So a lot of people will say, well, I need just, you bought a property, got a good price on it, you reinvested some money into it, because the BRRRR strategy basically stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So basically you buy a good deal, you rehab it, you put some more money into improving the property, you rent it out if it's not already rented, and it might already be rented, but you rent it out or improve the rents. And then from the new evaluation with the rents, you hope that you get a good refinance number, hopefully something substantially more than the money that you've put into it. And then you refinance. By refinancing it, you can hopefully pull all or at least most of the money you've invested back out so that you can spend it on another property. And then the repeat is essentially doing the whole thing again. So on a flip, investor has holding costs while renovating. And this is, so depending on, if it's a vacant property situation, investor has holding costs while renovating, showing, and then leading up to the closing. So like they have to renovate it to make it look good enough to put on the MLS. Then it's on the MLS, it's showing, you get under contract, and it's not like it closes unless you have a cash close. It's probably not closing the next week. You're probably closing a month out. So you have that extra holding time costs. It's usually a pretty quick turnaround because you want to limit your holding costs. So you're trying to do it as quickly as possible. Hopefully in a few months, but certainly under a year. So whatever proceeds you do have, you're paying your ordinary income tax on that, which for most people is much more than what they would pay if they paid capital gains. And then the cost of the rehab could cost more, since timing is important. So if you're trying to get a contractor to do drywall, electrical, plumbing, or whatever it might be, and you're saying, hey, I need you out, next week, I need you out 2 weeks from now, and you're trying to get everything so it happens quickly, that might end up costing more. I don't know if you experience that down here, but up in the Madison area, it's tough to find a contractor, period, let alone find someone who can do something on the schedule that you're looking for. Okay, so compare that to the BRRRR method. You have the investor can spread out the holding costs by doing one unit at a time, unless of course it's a single family. If it's a single family, you're under the same time crunch that the flipper is. But if it's, say, a duplex or a 4-unit, you can spread that out. You can do one at a time and still have cash flow come in from the other units. And like it says, some renovations can happen while the tenants are there. Not everything can. Sometimes you need a vacancy to do that. Back to the selling. If you do end up, selling it in time, you can certainly wait till after the 12-month period and only pay cap gains, or potentially, do a 1031 exchange. And then of course, if you're holding, which is the goal of the BRRRR, is that you hold on to it, you can take advantage of appreciation and other tax benefits like deductions and depreciation. Okay, so then this is just two very simplified examples of what it would look like for a flipper and someone doing a BRRRR on the same single family house. And I don't know what the average price point is around here, but in Madison, Wisconsin, single family or condo kind of lumped together is like in the mid 400s right now. So conceivably, if a property needed a little bit of work, was maybe a little bit smaller, or a little bit further out neighborhood, 300K is very realistic price point for some of those things, but it would definitely be on the lower end. So okay, flipper buys a house at 300,000. They invest another 30K into it to achieve a sale price of 400K. Gross profit, and just kind of using round numbers here, gross profit after closing costs, commissions is around 40K. And after holding costs, closing costs and commissions around 40K. And after holding costs, they're walking away with 35K. They will pay their ordinary income tax on that 35K. And from, most first-time flippers, that would be a huge win, because most flippers that I know, when they do their first one, actually walk away with more of an experience lesson than they do with money in their pocket. So, okay, so let's compare that to the BRRRR. Same house, 300,000, same investment of 30K back into the property. They're just hoping to achieve a bank appraisal of 400K. So assuming that the lender requires 20% equity, which some lenders, if you're doing this method, they want to keep 25% equity in the deal. So that would be something you'd have to check with your lender. The owner would get 320 of that original 330 back. So they've only got $10,000. So they weren't able to pull all their equity out, but pretty close. And now monthly payment, and this is again using Wisconsin numbers on for the property tax portion of it and insurance, because I don't know what that looks like down here. Monthly payment of $2,500, rents at $2,600 for 100 cash flow a month. Now I put this together about a year ago when interest rates were still at 6%. So I did another one of these of like, okay, well, what would this look like now? And there are a few changes. So, now in order to get it to positive cash flow, you would need 25% down. So you're not keeping, you're not just keeping as much in the deal. You're able to, you have a little bit more in the deal of your original 330 than what you would have had. And you're pretty much, I didn't tweak that number, but it's actually 25.75. So your cash flow is even more minimal. So that's why, the interest rate is a real factor. And we'll talk a little bit about the challenges with that a little bit later. But you'll see that overall, it's still possible, and there's still some pretty nice benefits to the strategy. So I've only done one true BRRRR. I mean, the other nice benefit of the BRRRR is you can do it on your own time schedule. It's not like it has to all happen within a few months' time. You can BRRRR 6 months later, 12 months later. I think it's intended to be done, within a certain amount, like probably 12 months or less. It doesn't have to be though. This is the one true BRRRR that I did. This was in, and I'm going to use some different examples because of other ones that I could do. It just wasn't intended as a BRRRR. This one, I bought in 2020. So this, after I bought that 8 unit earlier in the year, and now there's another real estate agent / investor in the Madison area who does kind of what, who does similar stuff to what I do. And he got a really, really good deal on a 2 unit. It was listed by an agent that didn't know the investment property market that well. And he kind of capitalized on that and got a really good deal on an MLS property just by, paying really close attention and moving quickly. So I was like, okay, I can't be, I got to do something too now, and I was really focused on 4 units and up. And so I'm like, I got to pay attention to everything. And this was a property that I actually tried to convince 3 different clients at some point of the year to go and see, and said, hey, this would be a good investment for you. Most of the properties in this neighborhood that are 2 units are selling in the mid 200s. And this one's only 230, and it's been on the market for a few months. You should consider seeing this and negotiating a better price. Oh, it doesn't look very nice on the photos. Doesn't look, and that's where, and then one of the things I, often tell people is, it's like, well, how does this, how does this look to you? Well, it doesn't look very good. Okay, well, to me, that looks like a discount. Just like the same thing when you go into a property and you're like, like, what is this? Is it smoke? Is it like pet? Is it like, I'm just like, you smell that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, smells like a discount to me. So that's the kind of stuff you want. Like, that's all the stuff that's going to scare off most other people is the stuff that you're wanting. So this property, I looked at the condition report, and that was pretty scary as well. I mean, at least they disclosed everything they knew, but there was knob and tube electrical. There was vermiculite insulation in the attic. That's like asbestos insulation. The garage roof, most properties in this area don't have a garage. This one did, and the garage roof looked like it was going to collapse. It's like a tin roof, all rusted out. I'm trying to think. There was standing water in portions of the basement. There was a lot of things that would scare off your typical first-time investor. For me, all I could see is this is going to cost $2,000. This is going to cost $5,000. This is going to cost $3,000. That's all that I was thinking about as I was going through the property. And the 2 units were actually pretty nice. And remember, 2020 was a time where some tenants weren't paying. These tenants were both paying. A little bit under rented, but not massively. So yeah. So anyways, I thought this was a pretty good opportunity. And I thought this would be a good experiment to see if I could actually do the BRRRR. I'd never done a BRRRR before. I heard about it a bunch of times on Bigger Pockets. And I was like, oh, this would be a good experiment if I can get them down in price low enough. So it was listed at $229. I ended up negotiating a price of $204. As an agent, I was actually able to get a little bit better price in this because essentially I used my commission. I could have used it in any way I wanted. I could have used it as a credit. I ended up using it as a price reduction. So it was actually better. But this is what, had I done the same negotiation for a client, this is the price I potentially would have gotten them if they would have written it as clean as I did, which, most of them probably would not have, but someone could have. All right. So right out of the gates, I just felt like it's probably worth more. ARV, it's worth more than what I bought it for. 2 unit. It was a 2-bed, 1 bath on the main level. It was a 2-bed, 1.5 bath on the second level. I have the assessor information. Rents were just over $2,000 a month total. So then these just kind of, this is the spreadsheet I use. And like, again, like I was an elementary physical education teacher. I wasn't, like I'm not a math or spreadsheet genius. I keep it really, really simple. Some people have like really robust spreadsheets. For me, it's just, like, hey, I want something that I can like plug in 5 minutes or less and know whether or not it's good enough to make an offer on. Again, I always put 1 year expenses at least 10 grand because of previous experience. So 20% down payment. That's the monthly payment would look like this. This is, of course, remember, this is 2020. So I've got a 3.5% interest rate. Kind of circle back on that. Property tax, 4,900. Insurance, 1,000. Annual maintenance. Again, I'm just like, I do it based on unit. If it's a newer building, I'll go less than that. But I'm usually at 750 to 1,000 a year on the annual maintenance. Property management, electric. So they only had 1 meter for the property when I purchased it. I knew I could split it, which I'll kind of show here in a little bit. It was also 1 furnace, so I'm paying heat. Water and sewer, there was only 1 meter, so I'm paying for that. It had a long driveway back to the, because usually I put the snow and lawn on tenants on a 1 or 2 unit, but like for this, I was just like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. The driveway is too long. So I knew I was going to have to hire that out. And so this is kind of like how it would have looked. Cash flow after property management, around $500, $2,500 if I would have self-managed, which I would not consider anymore, but for someone that would. And then, yeah, gross rent multiplier. It's just a very simple formula where you take the annual rent and, or you take the purchase price, divide by the annual rent. It's just a simple formula. Back in the day, I actually used that a lot on deciding whether or not to view a property. Cap rate is similar to the gross rent multiplier, except for now you're subtracting the expenses out of there. So this gives you a lot better picture of what it's at. In Madison, it depends on the area of Madison you're in, but things typically trade anywhere between like a 5 to a 6.5, depending on location for our area. So again, that's on the low side, even at that price. Price per door. That's that's how much it's making. If I paid it off cash, what's the return on my equity? And then how much, if I did a BRRRR at 20%, how much would I be able to keep into it? So that's kind of how that looks. So the one of the things I knew right away was kind of an undersell was the fact that the garage, I mean, it was just a bunch of junk. So I had to ask the tenants, I'm like, is any of this stuff yours? And one of the tenants had a bike in there, and one of the tenants had, I don't know, like a box in there. I said, can you just clear it out of here? I'm gonna rent this out. So they got their stuff out. I cleared, I basically put a dumpster, and my property management crew like cleared everything out, and we rented the garage. And so already right there, we have more rent coming in. Then on top of that, going back to I thought, okay, and this is as I'm running the numbers before I buy it, so I should just kind of talk about that. I'm thinking, okay, we can probably rent the garage, and I'll put $20,000 into the property instead of $10,000 because it needs a decent amount of work. And on the next rent cycle, which at that time was almost 12 months out because the leases ended June and July, and this deal was coming together at the end of the summer. I can get the rents on the units up to $1,185. Thought market was probably almost $1,200 a month on those. And here's what it will. So now the cash flow will be almost $7,000 a year with my property manager. But if I refinance it, essentially I'm going to, get my 228K back, so like my, so all the money that I've invested into it so far, well, actually I'll get more than my money back. Because at 20%, I'll actually receive $4,000 more than what I invested in it. And so, oops, sorry, I'm not used to this computer. So, so yeah, so my loan amount will be 228. So that's getting my initial investment back, plus an additional 4,000. And I still get to own the property, and the cash flow is not as good, but at the end of the day, it's about half actually, but around 3,500 a year. I still own the property, and I got all of my money back to reinvest in the next property. So at that point, I went ahead, started negotiating for the best price I could. I didn't start at 204, but that's where we ended up. And that was kind of in the range of what I was willing to accept.
I would want to keep the values up too, because by lowballing your own deal, you're affecting property values. I would again, it's just and I appreciate you sharing brainstorming there.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, I talked to a few of the neighbors after doing this, and no, because because it also is. I mean, it's also well, they actually liked it. I mean, they saw I was over there doing a lot of stuff to the property that probably should have been done in the last 10 years. No, I mean, from a property tax standpoint, I mean, if that helps keep their city assessment in check, I mean, they like that. And I don't know if anybody's basing, there's enough other sales in the neighborhood that are gonna prove the value of their home when they go to, if they were going to go to sell. That one-off property is not gonna crush their future sale price. So no, I didn't have any complaints about getting such a low price on that. Okay, so I have all my projected at the top. So everything that was on the last spreadsheet is still there, and I didn't change anything. What I did down here is I changed the actual, which was, and I have to, so going back to how the BRRRR can happen whenever you want, I did all this very quickly, and then I came across another deal. So all of a sudden it was like, oh, I need the money faster than what I thought. So I actually had it appraised fall of 2020, and was aiming for that 285 appraisal number so I could get all my money back. And then the appraisal came in at 250 or 255. I don't even remember anymore. And then that deal that I was trying to go into, not because of this, but because of some other factors, that whole deal fell apart. So I ended up not going through. Obviously I paid the appraisal fee, but I didn't go through with pulling the money out because I didn't have to. I was just like, okay, well, now I'll wait for the next deal. So fast forward a few more months. Now it's early 2021, probably January, February 2021. And the market starts off very, very competitive. I don't know what it was like down here, but in our market, it was almost like January ticked over, and it was like we were in the spring market already. It was the craziest thing we'd ever seen. At that time, unless you had a really intriguing property, like a lake property or something like that, you were probably average neighborhood 5 to 15K above ask would get a deal done. And all of a sudden 15K above ask, you're not even in the conversation. And so that was kind of what happened. So I got a little bit of the benefit of a hot market on that. The downside, as you'll see, is I way underestimated how much it would take to get the property done. I thought I could do it with 20K, ended up being 30K. So that was the downside. But like I said, the upside is now the appraisal comes in at 315. So not only do I get to pull my initial 230 back, but now I have 18K additional. So not only did I get all my money back, but I got 18K additional back when I did that refinance. So had I not moved forward with the refinance, had I kept my money in, well, I guess, if I'd done the kind of the conventional route, I should say, 20% down would have been, 7,900 a year cash flow. Instead, I do pull all that money out, and the cash flow ends up being 3,100. But now I've got that 230, well, actually now 258 back in pocket, so I can go ahead and purchase another deal. So that was the biggest benefit, is like, yeah, I lose some cash flow. However, now I've got all my original money back and then some. And I still own the property. It's going to keep going up in value. I still have the cash flow. I still have all the tax benefits. You know, going back to the earlier conversation about BRRRR versus flip, you know, had I done the flip, even had I sold it, you know, at the 315, you know, sure, you know, after closing costs, commissions, still almost, you know, still probably almost 100K there, but instead now I can use that 230 to purchase something else, and this one keeps making money. All right. Any questions about that part of things? Yeah.
So what are the contingencies that you have in place in case you can't rent them?
The vacancy rate in Madison is like 2.5%. So the likelihood of me not being able to rent it is super slim. And this area is pretty desirable. You know, it's not, I wouldn't rank it as one of the top 5 neighborhoods, but it's less than a mile from 2 of the top 5, you know, so, you know, it's a good area. I'd be shocked if I couldn't rent them. I mean, if anything, when you actually put the, let's see if I could go back to, oops, sorry, just not used to this computer here. We did end up hitting our rental projections of 2,500 a year by renting out a combination of renting out the garage and improving the rents. Trying to think what was the other. Yeah. So what the 18,000, I used some of that 18,000 to reinvest in the property too. So it wasn't like I just took that. I mean, could have just taken it and ran, but I took some of that, and the half, there was, the upstairs was a 1.5 bath. I took the half bath and converted that into in-unit laundry. So now they're down to 2-bed, 1 bath with in-unit laundry. They had to leave the building and then go into the basement and to do laundry, and just not a really good selling point when you're trying to rent out a unit, especially in Madison, Wisconsin, where you could be doing that and it's 0 degrees outside. So first floor has access, but second floor does not. So by doing that, made it a lot easier to rent that as well. But there was a question, so I do want to, I'll take yours.
When you say you rented the garage, did you rent that to a separate tenant, or did you just include it as part of the rental going forward?
Yeah, good question. So when we rented the garage, we first reached out to the 2 tenants and said, hey, would you have any interest in this at, you know, $130 a month or whatever what we were trying to get? Neither of them were interested. So then we just simply put it out there. And then there was this gentleman who has like a bunch of toys. Like he had like a couple RVs and like a snowmobile that he had to store for, you know, you can really only use them for a couple months out of the year. And so he needed to store it for 10 months out of the year. And for him, this worked out really, really well. And the garage isn't your typical garage. It's wide enough that it could have been a 2-car garage, but instead it's just one single door. So it's like a 1-car garage, but there's enough space on the side for more stuff. Then there's also a stairs that goes upstairs, and then there's just ample storage up there as well. So to me, it made more sense as a storage unit than an actual garage. Had it been your standard 2-car garage, we would have just probably said, okay, each unit gets half, you know, unit 1 gets this side, unit 2 gets this side, and we would have upped the rent. But you know, with the way it was set up, it made more sense to turn it into kind of a storage unit. So, and what was your question?
I had a question about the BRRRR. Do you calculate the closing cost to purchase and the refinance closing costs as part of that return?
So, I mean, again, that kind of goes a little bit into that 10,000, that 10,000 for the year one. But typically, even if you don't do any of that, you're gonna have some additional expenses year one. Because your closing costs are not gonna be 10,000. Or at least most of the time won't. So unless you have a unique situation, but that's kind of where that's accounted for, is in that part. Yeah.
In units you have today, and what is the challenge that you have? Like, the concern now is like, okay, now I have a place to rent, and we can pay off the place, we maintain the rent,
So I'm up to 54 units, and the only units that are currently vacant are ones that we're currently working on. And I purchased, and I just did a one of these on this one, and I YouTubed it. So if you're really curious on that one, you can watch that one. But I bought a 24 unit this summer. I sold my 8 unit on Valley Street in order to purchase it. And so that one's still in progress, but we're currently renovating 2 units. And then and we have 1 unit vacant because just time of the year, this isn't like an awesome time to try to get a tenant. We'll have these 2 done probably within the next couple weeks that we're working on. And then we're getting closer to March, but that's the other nice thing about having lots of units is, if I was, if I only owned a duplex and I was renovating one side, well, I've got rent coming in from one and I'm renovating the other, that's 50% of my rent that's coming in. If I have 50 units and I have 1 vacancy, that's 2% of my total amount of rents coming in. So that's where size actually helps you. And again, in Madison, the vacancy rate is extremely small. They literally can't build the apartments fast enough to put people in them. I live in downtown Madison, so I literally watch a high-rise apartment being built. Probably I watch one finishing every 3 months from my condo unit, and they can't keep up. Like there's just as tight as the housing market supply is in Madison, the rental market supply is just as tight. So I don't know what the rental market is here, but the last thing I'm worried about when I'm buying rental property is, am I going to be able to fill this, at least in the Madison market? So, but that is a good question, because I know it's not like that everywhere. They post that stuff every once in a while. I mean, sometimes there's like news articles on it. It's like same. I think they get it from MG&E. So MG&E is Madison Gas and Electric. So that's our utility company. So like the utility company says, oh, right now, this is how many landlords are currently paying for a unit. So like, that's about as accurate as you can get, I would think.
It's not gonna work in our market because we have in this area, we have too many short-term rentals. So usually utilities are either on property management.
Yeah, and that's a big difference with Madison is as soon as short-term rentals started becoming a thing, all the Madison hotel associations got together and were like, we need to figure out how to ban this. And so like, you can't do in Madison. Now, if you're in a suburb, you might still have an opportunity for that. But if you're in Madison proper, nope, you can't do a short-term rental. You can do medium-term rentals, but short-term, can't do that, not in Madison. So, yeah.
Before you were able to walk into a house and say, this is gonna cost X, this is gonna cost Y, how did you learn or factor in what certain repair work would cost before you probably know exactly now?
I know. Yeah. Some of these contractors, like they're probably annoyed with me back then. And now I've used them so many times that they have no problem with it. But I would call people. I just say, hey, how, and there, a lot of times you get the, it depends. I'm like, okay, I get it. But can you, here's the measurements I took, just give me a ballpark, if you're off by $1,000, I'm not gonna, come back and yell at you. I just need to know. And sometimes they'd give me a range. And then, since COVID, I mean, a lot of those numbers have changed too. So, but now I have the resource of my property manager, because he's got a much better pulse on that than I do. But yeah, it was just making a lot of calls. Yeah.
What cap rate do you generally aim for when analyzing the property?
I actually don't. I did another talk on that one time of like what I actually look like when I invest. And I went from showing how in 2011, I didn't know anything. Like, I mean, I actually, if anything, I got lucky. But I think that all goes back to, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later too. If you can probably look at deals, if your MLS is set up like ours, you can look at past sales from last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so on. I would say if you went back to last year and you looked at multifamily sales, you could probably pick out a handful of like, boy, I don't know if that was a good purchase. I don't know if that was a good purchase. I don't know if that was a good purchase. But if you go back 5 years and try to do the same thing, you're going to be really hard pressed unless you have some inside information, because there's every deal potentially could go bad if you don't know what you're doing. But if you go back 5 years, the likelihood of you finding a deal that that you're like, man, what was this person thinking, is even harder. You go back 10 years and everybody that purchased a property 10 years ago looks like a genius now, and so I look at, so at that time, so 2011, all I looked at was, what's my cash on cash return? I didn't care about anything else. And even now, like, it wasn't until I bought that 4-unit, because every purchase I had ever made, except for one, because, again, like I was like, why'd I buy this one? The 2017 was actually like my worst cash on cash. At that time, like my first few deals, I was like, I want to buy a rental property that can make me 10 grand a year by next year. Maybe it won't make me that this year, but it'll make that. That was it. That was the only requirement. Then I started looking at like, okay, now that I bought this one and it doesn't seem to be performing as well as these others, why don't I like it as much? So now I'm digging into the numbers even more. And that's when I decided, okay, these other ones had cash on cash returns of 15% or higher. And this one only had a cash on cash return of, I don't know, 7 or 8%. So I was like, so that's how I started moving forward. But here I am getting under contract. And I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but like I got under contract at the end of 2022. And so a little over a year ago on this 4-unit in my hometown. And the future cash flow projection was only 8%. And even when I ran it at a lower interest rate, it still didn't get up to 15%. I'm like, why am I so excited about this one? And it's actually going to be the next property I talk about. So you're going to get to kind of see, but you got to look at everything. I mean, you can't just, if you're only fixated on one aspect of like, okay, if it hits this particular metric, I buy it. And if it doesn't, I don't buy it. You're potentially missing out on some opportunities. And that's what I realized. And again, I've been doing this for over a decade now, and it took me 11 years to even come to that realization. And so you kind of have to look at a little bit of everything when you're doing that. I don't know. Did that answer your question? Okay, cool. Yeah, correct. So that would be, I was basically just seeing, it was B neighborhood. I knew if I owned this property for a long time, it was going to continue to go up in value. So if I could put my money in, get it all back, use it to reinvest in something else while keeping this property at a minimal cash flow, that would, but it's not just the minimal cash flow. It's like, okay, I got a little bit of cash flow coming in, like even based on this, would end up, because it's not that much, 3,100 a year. So after, getting that cash out refinance, taking that 285 out, 3,100 a year was the cash flow. But the principal pay down per year is probably, somewhere between $5 to $7 grand a year. I mean, that keeps going up eventually, but $5 to $7 grand a year in principal pay down, plus depreciation. I don't know what my accountant would say on this one, but like, I'm probably, I'm pocketing $3,000 a year on an average year. And my guess is if I talk to my accountant on this one, I'm writing this off as a loss every year. Yeah, and so the appreciation, which I'm going to kind of get that on the next sheet here, I think. Because now let's fast forward to today. Let me go down a little bit. So today, what does Upham look like? If I put on the market at 360, I'd be shocked if I don't have multiple at-ask offers. In fact, most likely it would be a competitive offer situation. I think it would actually sell probably closer to 380, but I think I could get a bank to appraise it at 360 right now. So it's gone up. It's continued to go up in value since 2021 when I purchased it. The rents, I'm up to, remember, I was able to, in 12 months or a little under 12 months, get the rents up to 2,500. Rents are currently at 2,730. So moving ahead to the cash flow, by the end of year one, I was set up for a 3,100 a year. And now I'm at almost 5,200 a year. And I continue to own the property, continues to go up in value. I continue to get the benefits of the principal pay down. I continue to be able to depreciate it every year. And like I said, I would have to talk to my accountant to be sure, but even though I'll walk away with 5,100 or so for this year, I'll likely get to write this off as a break even or a loss, based on the other factors from my accountant. So anyways, but I did want to kind of do this to be like, okay, part of what makes this look so good is when I did it, there was a 3.5% interest rate, which you can't get that anymore. Okay. So you can see, kind of going back to those slides before where I was like, you have to kind of adjust this. You might not be able to keep 20% in the deal anymore. Might have to keep, or you might have to, instead of a 20/80, you might have to keep more money in the deal to make it work. Because based on the old, it would have actually lost money. And even with the new rents, it'd be losing less money, but it's still losing some money. So again, if you factor that in with not being able to keep as much in, it would, you could make it cash flow positive, but you'd have to do that. So anyways, that's my little, side thing that I have to kind of mention is the BRRRR worked a lot better when interest rates were 4% or less. But I'm going to show you on this next one how it doesn't necessarily have to. And this is the one I was just talking about. Okay, so this one is 200 East Harriet Street. This is in Verona. This is my hometown. It's a suburb of Madison. And that last one, again, that was Upham Street, which I just spent quite a bit of time on. That was an MLS deal. That one was on the MLS for 6 months before we went under contract. I tried to convince multiple clients to purchase that one. This one was an off-market deal. This one is an apartment building that's next door to my plumber. And I've told my plumber, and hopefully you're doing the same thing when you're trying to find deals, is talk to the type of contractors that are likely to know if someone's in a distressed situation. So, roofer, plumber, emergency type things where someone's like, oh, I have an immediate need to sell. My roof needs replacement. I don't have the money to do that right now, or whatever the situation might be. So my plumber told me about this one. And again, when I show you the numbers on it, I was thinking, oh, why am I so intrigued by this deal? At the time, a lot of 4 units in Madison were selling in the mid 400s. So, a 4 unit for a suburb of Madison, in my mind, it didn't seem like it was, like crazy good deal. That was the price we negotiated to. So the reason I put that as the ARV, I didn't know this at the time, but like that's what when I did purchase it, I financed it, and that's what the appraisal came in at. So it ended up being a pretty good, right out of the gates, equity builder. 4 unit, all 4 units are 2 bed, 1 bath. That was what the city assessed it at. Verona City Assessors notorious for under evaluating properties, so that's not surprising. Can you guys see this okay? Do you need me to make it a little bit bigger, or okay? So annual rent, so the rent was only $31.50 a month, which is crazy low for that area. So it was super under rented. Again, 10,000 expenses for year 1. Down payment of 93,000, loan amount of 372. Property taxes 7,500, insurance $3,000, annual maintenance 2,000. Proper management fees, electric, gas, water, sewer. Water, sewer is separately metered, and everybody has their own gas meter, so I don't have to pay for that. Lawn and snow estimated at $1,500 a month, or excuse me, $1,500 a year. And so you could see, because of the super low rents, I mean, it's negatively cash flowing over $7,000 a year with property management. Gross rent multiplier of 12.3, cap rate of 4.1. But return on my equity is already at 63% without even doing anything to it. So that's pretty good. But again, I didn't know that at the time that I made, at the time that I made the offer. Okay. So what did we think we could get the rents to? We thought we should be able to get them to 5,000. That'd be $1,250 a unit. That would mean removing all 4 of the current tenants, and one of the tenants was a smoker. So there was going to be some additional cost to that. So I just kind of estimated rehab cost at $50,000 of improvements. They had already done some of that. So like they had already renovated 2 of the kitchens. So I was like, okay, I'll renovate the other 2 kitchens, and the bathrooms were like super outdated. The building's like right out of the 50s. So we're talking like, pink tile for the bathroom and everything, which I don't know, maybe some people would think that's cool, but yeah. So anyway, okay. Oops, going the wrong way. All right, so we ended up, the actual isn't way different than what we projected. We ended up being able to rent it a little bit better than we thought. There's 1 unit that was like a little bit larger that I said, okay, when we rent that unit out, I want to try to get more for that. I want more than $1,250. He's like, I don't think you'll get much more than $1,250. Let's try for $1,275. He's like, it's not that much bigger than the other units. And so we put that up at $1,275, and we got it rented so fast with so many applicants. He's like, okay, when we rent the next one, we'll go $1,275 on that one too, even though it's smaller. And same thing happened. And then the same thing happened. And then by the last one, we didn't even finish the renovation. We did get the bathroom done, but we didn't get the last kitchen did not get done. They said, I'll just take it as is at $1,275. I'll just take it as is. So this is the point we're realizing, okay, we're still under rented. but we ended up with a little bit more rent. And just kind of go over here. So so again, we were losing money every month until we got the units vacated. And we did give the tenants an opportunity to re-sign at the new prices. And they all declined. They all thought it was like way too high. But now with the new rents, we were projecting about 12 grand a year in cash flow, ends up being $13,000 a year in cash flow. Based on kind of retooling, like, okay, it came in at a 530 evaluation, and even the person that appraised it said, hey, if he can get the rents up to market, it's going to go up even higher. Based on, factoring a cap rate of, I can't remember if I based it off a 6 or a 6.5 on the current rents and expenses. Now I'm thinking it's about a $650,000 purchase or evaluation. So that's just in the term of 1 year, and I bought it at $465. So that's almost 200,000 in 1 year. So what happens if I were to refinance it? So let's say it's 650. They allow me to, trying to get to it. Sorry, I'm just not used to this computer, so it's a little baggage for me. So at 650, that means I would get to pull out the original 465 plus an additional 5,000. So if I finance if I finance 470, what does it look like? So what if I BRRRR this? I haven't done this yet, but this is theoretically what I could do. Okay, well, I'd have everything financed. I would go from $13,000 a year of cash flow down to $6,000. But I would continue to own the property, would continue to go up in value every year, continue to get the tax benefits of the depreciation. The tenants are paying down the principal. And on top of that, I have $470,000 that I can reinvest into another property. I've got almost a 50% down payment on $1 million property. Or the better way to do it is put a 25%, or 20% down payment on a $500,000 property, and then use an additional 10 to 20% on improving the property. So you're not using any additional, excess funds to do it, and just keep doing this, So this one, when I bought it, it was at a closer to current interest rate of 6%. So this is based off of a 6% interest rate. Now, interest rates for investment property, at least around our area, is still not quite that low. So I did do another one. And so I can plug that in. So here's the interest rate. See if it'll work this time for me. So I'll change it to 7.5, which is closer to the commercial rate that I'm getting. I do typically do it with commercial financing. And so on the current rents we're getting right now that we signed in the spring, it's basically a break-even cash flow. It's $400. But based on what we're about to go to, that's 4,100 a year. So still not a massive amount, but that's pretty good considering you still get all the benefits of owning the property, and you can recapture that 470,000 and reinvest that into something else. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just clarify? So you get it, you reappraise it, so you then take out the 470 of cash. So you refinance,
Which is, by the way, a non-taxed event. So like, there's not too many opportunities you get in real estate where you don't get taxed on taking a large sum of money. But in this case, when you do a cash out refinance, that's considered like moving money from your checking account into your savings account, or vice versa. That's seen as your money. So that's a non-taxable event. But keep going with the question.
Because that's something I was trying to work out was, because obviously having the cash out is cheaper and then doing the renovation on the next one. So trying to work out, do you do it with that or do you get a loan that's an investor loan with renovation included?
You could, I mean, if your lender's willing to let you do that, you can. You could also decide like, what you're comfortable, how much leverage you want to be on it. The way I would do it now, especially because you're about to, it didn't kind of work out that way, but the one that I'm about to show you, I basically sold an 8-unit at $875 to purchase and I'm rounding here, but $2.6 million 24 unit. So I used all of the proceeds in on that, even though that was more than 20%. And then, because my accountant told me to wait a couple weeks, your accountant might tell you to wait longer than that, but I cash out refinanced the brand new purchase property and pulled $300K out. And that's my rehab budget. And that's my rehab budget. Yeah. I did it that way because that was the advice I got from my accountant. That was that was a 1031 exchange. And so I was told that from his perspective, when he's doing my 2023 taxes, it was going to be easier for him to show that I did complete the exchange as was needed. And that if I waited 2 weeks, that he'd have an easier time showing that as like a reallocation of funds. I don't know exactly how that stuff works. I just tell him like, whatever you need me to do to make your job easier, I'll do. Just tell me what that is.
But I'm just going to work out where you got the money to do the renovation, because that money that you leverage from the sale of the properties is cheaper than, or getting a mortgage for it is cheaper than, doing it out of cash out of pocket.
Yeah, in this case, I did. So in this one, I did pay for it out of pocket. And if you look here, that is the other change that I didn't highlight yet, is it ended up being, 80,000. So really, I'm, in that case, I'm really keeping 75K, or well, 70K, I guess. Am I doing the math right? Got 75. So I'm keeping 75K in the deal in that way, because that's money I didn't get back out the money plus the rest of my rehab budget. So from that perspective, yeah, I'm keeping 75K in the deal still. I didn't get it quite all back yet. And that's the other thing too. I think some people think when you do the BRRRR, it only counts as a BRRRR if you get all the money back. You don't have to, as long as you get enough that you can move on to the next property. I mean, that's really the key. You don't have to have this perfect situation, which is again part of the reason with the interest rates being what they are now. It's okay to leave a greater amount in the deal in order for it to continue to be positive, a positive cash flow. You don't have to just, and some lenders won't allow you to pull out 80% equity. Some lenders will only allow you to pull out 75% equity. So you just have to know what they're willing to do and what makes sense for you. Yeah.
Are you doing that built into your budgets? Yes.
Yeah. So my property manager, he does it, and for certain things that he can't do. So part of the reason the rehab budget went up on this one is they all had separate furnaces, which was great, but none of them had central AC. And my property manager was like, if I can tell people that we'll have central AC coming by summertime, I know I can get more on the rents. And I said, okay, let's do it. So now adding in 4 AC units and having an electrician come out and do everything that they needed to do, that was, and some other stuff went over too, like that smoker that was in that one unit, that ended up costing more than I thought to get that unit to where I wanted it.
And then from when you started to now, I know that for all investors it's a different preference, but I'm just curious, how you started, how you would do it differently? Did you purchase them in LLCs, individual LLCs? How did you start and how would you do it now?
That's a good question. So when I bought the first place, it was in my personal name. And I think if you have one property, one investment property in your personal name, that's totally your preference. For me, that property was very low maintenance, so it was very easy to keep track of the numbers on it. Once I got to two, I did finance those conventionally. And so I should have kept it under my personal name. Instead I did a quick claim deed and switched them over, which again, talked to an attorney to see, like what they would say about that. But essentially I talked to my lender at the time and said, hey, I'm considering doing this. They said, well, technically we could call your loan past due, but the reality is, as long as you don't miss a payment, they're not going to know, they're not going to care. Just don't miss a payment. Oh, yeah. On a scale, yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 10 on like taking a risk, if you're not at least a 5, you will never invest in real estate. Period. You're never going to do it. I'm probably about an 8. My mentor, when I got into this, so before I was at Keller Williams, like, he was a 10 out of 10. I mean, he had everything in his personal name. He had over a dozen properties all in his personal name. And he was just, oh yeah. And like, I mean, a lot of times he would just go for it. So, I would look at him and be like, whoa, the same way you're, like, I'd be like, man, he's a risk taker. But yeah, I would say, I mean, I work with, a decent amount of investors, and I'd say, and I tell them all the time, like, if you're not at least at like kind of a 5 on, risk taking, but the more, I mean, just as anything else, the more risk, the more reward, and possibly the bigger loss. Possibly. Yeah, and you can, and like I said, so if you're one single family house, to answer your question again, personal preference, you could put it under your personal name. But for me, where it started getting complicated was once I had 2 properties and they were both not low maintenance. Now I had more expenses going out and it was getting harder and harder to keep track of money spent. So by putting them in LLCs, it made from an accounting standpoint, I was still doing my own accounting at that time. It made it much, much easier because now once you have an LLC, they get, an EIN number, which is essentially like a social security number for the business. Now I had one for this business, one for this business, and now I can get a credit card for each one, and I can get a checking account for each one. And then at the end of the year, when I was tabbing up expenses, it got very, very easy because for this particular house or the building, I could simply go to that checking account and just look back. Okay, here were the checks that I wrote for this property for the year. And I could look at my credit card statements and do the same thing. I know exactly what was spent on that property. And then I could do the same thing for this property. And I kept doing that until I got to 4 properties. But now, again, now that I got a property manager, he does all that. But now I do, so once I got to property 3, I started just doing commercial loans and putting them in LLCs right out of the get-go. And I've never looked back.
An individual for each property.
Each Lake Point Drive, it's basically a city block of Madison. It's 5 buildings. It's four 4-unit buildings and an 8-unit building. And I have that under one LLC. In part because it makes sense. I mean, they're all right next to each other. So for me to do like a combined LLC, it would have to be similar properties near each other. It wouldn't have to be next door to each other, but like those first 2 properties that I bought, they're a little less than a block away from each other. So if I was at the current state that I'm in now, back then, like I still even look back and go, why didn't I just put those 2 in the same LLC? But at the time I wasn't there, like at the time, each one of those properties was about separately was 1/3 of like my entire equity, with the last third being in the place that I lived in. So it was like, so it was a pretty big chunk, but now that I own quite a bit more property, it's, it's like, well, why didn't I just combine those? But that's not where I was at that time.
So, because I know that the recommendation is to have every single property in a separate LLC, but then to have an umbrella so you can charge, and it goes back to one central company. So you can,
Yeah.
Is that how you structure it?
That's how it is structured. But like, I get different advice from like all over, like, my attorney is telling me,
Ability.
my attorney's telling me, my attorney's telling me put everything into a separate LLC, period. My accountant's like, you can do it however you want. I mean, you're making my life easier by having them all in separate ones, but you don't have to do it that way. And your insurance agent might tell you something different. So you just have to kind of do what makes sense for you. And like I said, what made sense for me, 8 years ago when I set up my first LLCs, and what makes sense now is very different. Yeah.
You buy out of state, like your state, for like everything.
I haven't even bought out of county yet. Yeah. Everything I've ever bought is inside of Dane County. Madison's smack dab in the middle of Dane County. Currently, everything I own is in Madison, except for this one on East Harriet Street, which is in Verona, which is my hometown.
Would you buy it or you like to?
I know the Madison market much, much better than any other market. So I feel like I'm at an advantage with that. So it would take a really good relationship with somebody in a different area that I trusted. And then it would be like probably like a partnership type agreement. That's probably what it would take to do a deal outside of the state for me, or outside the area. Yeah.
Well, welcome, fellow Midwesterner.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in Central Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Moved here in '89.
Okay, great.
And my late husband and I would invest in a lot of rental properties and multi-units, and we had a great math teacher who was our realtor. She was #1 in her agency too, by the way.
Okay.
Working at part-time. She did it for years. But we knew we could count on her to let us know the minute something went on the market that was a great deal. She would crunch it for us. She had all the connections with the plumbers, the contractors, and everybody. And so we always trusted her to let us know. I think that's the important thing about being a realtor, is knowing and being able to help others, even if we're not just doing it for ourselves. But that's, 7% interest back then when we bought. But eventually we sold out in the '90s, everything, and did well. But I think that's the thing that we learned, and she taught us, we're going to buy concrete block versus the wood structures that are going to deteriorate in the ice and snow and stuff like that. And so I know that's the things you probably look at too. I don't know. But we ended up having a property manager take care of it when we moved down here. But
Yeah. Yeah, no, all those things are considerations. I mean, I do the same thing when I'm like touring homes with first time home buyers. Same thing is just kind of like, hey, here's the house. This roof looks like it's in pretty good condition. This roof looks like it's nearing the end of the age. Hey, the siding is vinyl. This is really, really low maintenance. Hey, this siding is wood. You're going to have to repaint this every X amount of years. So all those are factors that we're talking about as we're touring properties. Yeah. Any other questions on this part? Yeah.
Question on commercial financing. So most of them, they are either ARM loans, adjustable rate, or you getting them fixed rate.
No, they're all adjustable rate. So
what's the term on them?
I mean, that's also, I mean, the nice thing about commercial is like everything's flexible.
Mhm.
So it's whatever is most important to you at that time. Most of mine, not all of them, but most of mine are five-year terms, 30-year amortizations. But as the financing's gotten tighter, they were like not okay with 30-year amortizations anymore. It went down to a standard 25-year amortization, which is more typical with commercial financing. So the negative is less cash flow. The positive is your equity from the principal pay down is better. So it's kind of it's like for me, that's a wash, but like ideally I'd rather have the money on hand to reinvest it and look for the next opportunity. Everything that I've done in the last 9 months has been a 3-year term because I'm betting that the interest rate is going to go down. And you can usually get a little bit better rate on a 3-year than you can on a 5-year. So I'm like, okay, I'll take my extra, whatever, 1/4 to 1/3% lower, knowing that I'm likely going to refinance before we hit 3 years anyways. So that's how I've approached it, but it just all depends on, whatever you can work out with the lender. Very different than conventional where it's a set package, 30-year fixed, or 15-year fixed if you want to do that. Yeah, what's your question?
Sorry, I know you said that you went to a property manager after 5 years at the 50th property, I think you said.
Right before the 5th property. Yep.
So based on what you've learned and buying and increasing your reputational, what would your advice be to when you think someone should get property management?
If you're retired and this is what you're doing full time, you could probably, it depends, if like I have a gentleman, he's retired. He's got one property right now. He's looking to get to another. He could probably do 20 units on his own, probably no problem, as long as he's okay, with working that much. Some people want to not work that much in retirement. But if you're an agent, if you're talking about for yourself, you're like an agent in production and you're, the way I started looking at it is like, okay, I'm showing apartments to people who may or may not want to sign a $1,500 a month lease. And that's taking up my time when I should be, because I would book appointments for that. And then it's like, because of that, sometimes it made it really difficult to show somebody a house where I was potentially going to make an $8,000 to $15,000 commission. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So I would say me as an agent, remember, I was still a physical, when I had 4, I was still a physical education teacher, who's just starting to get into real estate as an agent. I would say, and again, it just depends on what you want to take on, but I would probably say at 4 units, you'd want to consider it for sure. And at 8 units, like it's a no-brainer, I think, at least from mine. Like as soon as I hired him, I was like, I should have done this a year ago. It wasn't like, oh, this was a bad decision, or oh, look how much cash flow I'm giving up. I had to kind of look at that, because at the time I was making 40K a year off the cash flow, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to lose 1/4 of that to property. So 25% of my cash flow is gone. And so I had to rethink that. I had to be, okay, really, it's $10,000. Can I make up that $10,000 if I just do one more deal a year? Well, I'm already at break even if I can just do one more deal. Can I? Probably, just by having that off my plate. And not only did it work out that way, but it worked out to the point of like, oh, wow, now that I don't have to do all this stuff and somebody else is doing this for me, I can buy more. I have enough time to analyze some more deals and purchase some more deals. I just wanted to kind of show this one really quickly. This was that 24 unit purchase that I was talking about, and just kind of showing, you know, how this kind of came. It was, you know, severely under rented. Here's where we think the rents could be. This is where we're at in progress. I mean, we're literally in progress on this one, you know, so this is like, this could end up taking a year and a half before we could potentially BRRRR this one out, like get it to the full value. So when I first bought it, that's a lot of money to lose if we don't change anything. That's, you know, 53,000, but now we're basically doing everything on a bigger scale now. You know, 24 units, you know, we're six times what I just showed you on that last 4 unit. So yeah, if we're losing $54,000 a year, that's not good. We're already at the point where we're, you know, based on our monthly, we're already down to 73, and probably pretty soon we'll be in the positive cash flow mark. And then by the end of the year, we'll be at the, you know, we'll be at the full, you know, cash flow. It's actually a little bit better than that though, at least currently, because that's the other thing that you can work out with a conventional financer or financing. I'm actually paying less per month because it's a principal only payment for the first 12 months. So that helps me from a cash flow perspective. But again, this one, I locked the rate at 7.31. So this was near the peak. I mean, it kept going up after that, but they stopped at 7.75. That's where they kind of like plateaued, and they're still at 7.75. So this one, when I rerun this, you know, so okay. So trying to get back to it. So target evaluation on this one is 3.6 million. Bought it for 6.2 and change. So we're looking at improving the equity by about $1 million in 1 year. So if I can do that and only keep 62,000 in the deal, you know, we're at a cash on cash of 12.4, which is good, but not amazing. But this is the direction I think the interest rate is going to be going here pretty soon. I put it to a 6.5. And now 38.1%. Plus I improved the equity $1 million, you know, we're pretty close to. All right. What's your question?
So are you doing the one, do you have a partner for that? Do you have an old investor between the 4 units?
So this one, so okay, going back to the first one I showed you was an MLS deal. That last one I showed you, the 4 unit in Verona, that one was a lead from a contractor I work with, in this case, my plumber. This one, I sent out $3,000 worth of letters and $1,000 a month for 3 months. And this was in a response to the letter. It was supposed to go out to 2 to 4 unit property owners who've owned their property for, I think it was 8+ years. And in this case, they, you know, had owned it for about a dozen years. And they, you know, were looking to sell as a father-son combo. And they responded to the letter, and it just was a good fit on both sides. I really liked them. They really liked me. I put together a pretty clean offer, other than the fact it involved a sale contingency, but I got that 8 unit on the market the next week, and we had it under contract less than 7 days of going on the market. I priced it to sell, and that went pretty well. So, but anyways, you know, from a cash flow perspective, so that's the return on the but yeah, even after pulling all of that money back out, it would still be cash flow positive of $23,000, even after pulling all that money. And that's a substantial amount of money to pull out and reinvest. And plus all the same tax advantages and everything else. That's part of the reason the BRRRR is such a powerful tool. And in my opinion, much better than simply improving it to sell it the next year and flipping it. They were all built from the early 50s to the early 60s.
Like super old.
Oh, really?
Yes, I call 1990.
That Upham one was not like 1910-ish. Yeah. Limestone foundation.
Yeah.
All right, so I did a whole session. I'm like, I take certain slides out of sessions where I'm like, okay, this session is worth just briefly touching on. I did one called Investing in Challenging Times, right about the same time that I bought that 4-unit Harriet Street in Verona. In part because that was where I was really like, why did I buy this property? I just bought this property. It doesn't hit the metric that I've set for myself. And so I want to touch on this. The reasons not to buy are always clear and right in front of us. That's what you hear on the news. That's what your friends and family are telling you that aren't involved in this. And the reasons to buy are often not clear for 1 or 2 years. So I say this a lot. I say this to my regular home buyers and sellers, just who are just looking to buy a single family house. But this is why so many wait to take action. And I'll give you some examples. 2011, when I bought my first property, everybody was telling me, are you insane? Properties are losing value every year. You buy that property this year, it's going to be worth less next year. Why would you buy something now that's going to be worth less next year? But I was like, hey, at the time I didn't know, but I was thinking, it's I'm buying this property. It's going to make me $7,000 a year my first year. If I can increase the rents, it might be $8,000 or $9,000 by next year. This seems to make a lot of sense. All right. So what we didn't know, now everybody that bought a property in 2011 looks like a genius. Because again, going back to the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. 1 year ago, you can find some people that you're like, no, I'm not sure that was a good deal. They might have overpaid or, whatever. 5 years, that's a lot harder to find. 10 years, that's almost impossible. Like unless there was something crazy with that property, like the scenario we just talked about. So the real story with 2008 to 2012 is properties at an all-time discount we may never see again. If you bought that year, you got to take advantage. And then it just kind of keeps continuing, all the way to 2021. Prices are too high. Just wait for them to come down. This is crazy. No one should ever buy properties this high. 2021. Interest rates are at record lows. Rent prices are going up quickly. If I could do 2021 all over, I'd buy a lot more property. But at the time, everybody's telling you like, this is insane. These properties aren't worth this. It's going to go down. There's always a reason to not buy. That was very clear that year. And then the reason that you should have bought didn't come clear. So right now, there's a lot of reasons people are telling people not to buy, and we're not going to know for another year or two why we should have. And that's how it always is going to be with investment real estate. So the insider tips, kind of going back to what I was saying before, there's no smoking gun. There's no hey, if it hits this criteria, I definitely buy it. And if it doesn't hit it, I definitely don't buy it. There's a lot of ways to look at deals. There's also no perfect deal. If there's a lot of people out there, there's investors I work with, they're like waiting for this perfect deal to fall in their lap. It's never going to happen. And in fact, I would say this, even if it did exist and someone waits 2 or 3 years to find that perfect deal, by the time they find that perfect deal and somebody else this year purchased an average deal, the person who purchased an average deal this year is going to be so much farther ahead because they'll have 3 years more experience. They'll have 3 years of cash flow. They'll have 3 years of the tax benefits. They'll have 3 years of principal pay down. there's so much that person gains by getting that average deal right now compared to the person that finds the perfect deal in 3 years. It's also not rocket science. Again, if you look at my spreadsheets, I've seen some pretty robust stuff from different investors. It's pretty simple. Just know how much money's coming in, know how much money's going out, and be able to do the math on it. I was an elementary physical education teacher for 16 years. I don't have any accounting or background or anything like that. Anybody can do this. And of course, the famous, don't wait to buy real estate, buy real estate and wait. A lot of the purchases I've made, even like the least lucrative purchase I ever made, which basically all the cash flow has basically had to go back into the property in terms of cap expenses. So, think of it as I've owned it for about 7 years and it's basically made no money. I still got the tax benefits. I still own a property that's worth over $100,000 more than I bought it for, maybe approaching $200,000 more than I bought it for. It still worked out. And that's the least lucrative purchase I've ever made. Got to be prepared. And being an expert in one area is better than being a jack of all trades. If you're going to say, hey, I want to invest in, small multifamily, then stick with that for now and get really, really good at that before you start going somewhere else. Because I see some people like, oh, I'm gonna do small multifamily. I'm gonna do commercial. I'm gonna do short-term rental. I'm gonna do long-term rental. It's like, just you gotta kind of stick to one thing, get really, really good at one area, and then figure out if you're gonna add something to that. For me, I'm small to medium-sized multifamily buy and hold. And then take action. That's the big thing. The first actor on the buy is the first part of the acronym. If you don't do that, you can't do any of the other steps. Just take action, look for a deal, and buy it. So this is what I tell first-time investors. Interview and hire a real estate agent or a team that has experience with investment real estate. Ideally, a person that owns investment real estate that's experienced in what you're about to do. Talk to a lender, discuss options, figure out what will work best. Set up an MLS search on properties that fit your price range in your area, and start analyzing properties and have discussions with your agent. Note, all of these are free of cost. This is at this point, you've spent $0. You're just investing, some of your time. And this is what you should talk to your investors about as well. Recommended books: Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which I've got right here, Bigger Pockets Podcast, and then the Buy, Rehab, Rent, Refinance, and Repeat, the BRRRR book by David Greene. We are going to raffle these off. It must be present to win. Thanks for sticking around. And hey, and just, and I'm sure there's more questions, I will stick around as long as it takes here at the end of this. I know there's going to be lunch here, so I'm happy to stick around and answer individual questions, but I will answer any. So let's plan on doing that, and let's go ahead and do the raffle. Awesome. Well, yeah. Well, hey, thanks again. Enjoy lunch, and I look forward to answering some more questions and meeting you all in a little bit. Thank you.